Hello, everyone. Today is Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters. It's episode 5, and we are talking about 12 Angry Men, the movie, which was filmed in or came out in 1957. So, my name is Lucinda Sage Midgorton.
I am Celeste Sage Tate.
And we are so excited to talk about this movie. Let me read the description. It's
Okay.
such a great movie. The jury in a New York City murder trial is frustrated by a single member whose skeptical caution forces them to more carefully consider the evidence before jumping to a hasty verdict. So I watched the special features of this movie, and something really interesting came up. They had one with the filmmakers, and then they had one with um, lawyers and maybe even prosecutors and judges. And they said this movie is one that they think should be shown not only to law students, but to people who are prospective jurors.
Excellent.
And it's also interesting that it was made for television. It was really popular in 1954. And Reginald Rose wrote both screenplay and teleplay. He wrote it after he was on a jury. And for manslaughter, I guess it was, not murder in his case. But the thing that was so interesting is when this movie came out, people had already seen it on television. They really liked it, so they didn't really go see it. And also, the people who were in charge of marketing it put it in these really big venues, and it
Yeah.
what that didn't help it.
No.
But the filmmaker said it was immensely popular outside the United States,
Right.
which is like, whoa, I wonder why.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Uh, but partly it might be because it shows how our judicial system works.
Right. I think so. I think
And
it's interesting too. Even to this day, it is shown in certain classes
mhm,
for conflict resolution.
right,
And I thought
exactly.
that was fascinating because
Yeah,
it is
business schools.
amazing conflict resolution lessons.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
So it's a cult classic now.
yep.
And it's on the AFI, lists of best movies,
For sure.
and it's even on the Internet Movie Database best lists of, courtroom dramas. And so it has, even though it didn't do well when it first came out, it's really, it is a top-notch movie. So, yeah, I had a really hard time picking scenes for this because, like all the movies we've done so far, one thing builds on the next thing, builds on the next thing, builds on the next thing. So, um, yeah, it starts in the courtroom, and one of the lawyers said, I've never seen a so lackadaisical judge. Judges usually are quite, you've got to do this when they're instructing the jury. The judge that the way they portray the judge in the movie, he's just sort of, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that.
Right.
It's like he sounds bored.
I almost wonder if that was done intentionally because um I think they wanted to give him look like he had a bias.
Maybe. Could be. You're right. Now, the only thing that we ever get to see, we just have one shot of the kid's face who's on trial
Yeah.
as the jury is filing out. And
And you
I,
see that he is of Hispanic descent
yeah, or something.
or
Puerto
Cuban or
Rican.
something. Yeah, or
Yeah.
Puerto Rican.
Yeah. And I did notice this time when I was watching it that Jack Klugman specifically, when he's getting direction, that when they're getting the directions from the judge, is looking over at the kid, which
Yes.
you find out later why he's doing that.
Yep.
So it's just his face, the kid's face, he's so
Well, he looks like
young.
he's 12 years old.
He's innocent
Yeah.
looking. Well, he's supposed to be 18, but yeah, he
He looks so
does.
young. Yeah.
He does. He
Yeah.
does. So, right there, it kind of makes you want to go, oh, don't don't
Yeah. Don't
convict him
hurt
of
this kid.
murder. You
Yeah.
know?
Don't hurt him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so what do you have anything you want to say about the movie before we talk about the very first scene?
Well, I too was noticing the jury as well, and I also noticed Jack Klugman really, really looking at that kid, and
Mm-hmm.
he's afraid himself, which is really good acting because when you
Mm-hmm.
find out later why.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted us to see the jury because some looked very bored,
Right.
didn't really want to be there.
Right.
They just were like, you could tell some were like, just hurry up and get this over with. I don't
Right.
even want to. And some looked like they felt out of place.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really, and then of course, um, Henry Fonda's character he seemed very
Mm-hmm.
attentive,
Yes.
present. He was very present.
Yes.
For some, I guess the word I was really looking for didn't look present, like they could care less.
Right. Like
Um,
Jack Warden's character, he wants to
oh
get off
yes,
to the
Jack
game.
Gordon just wanted to go to his baseball game.
Right. Yeah.
And we will point out that they set this movie in a very hot summer in New York.
Yeah.
And they talk about
Right.
the conditioning system not kicking in yet, um
And the fan doesn't work.
and well, yeah. So
Well, I mean, it works, but they can't figure out how to get it
we
to
couldn't
work at
figure out how to
first.
make it work, right?
Yeah.
So and it's also interesting to point out that women could have been on the jury.
Right.
Women were able to be on juries 20 years prior to all of this.
Right.
But as we were looking at, Jamie and I were looking at history, they more than likely would not be put on murder cases. They were
Oh,
on
it would be,
lesser known, lesser, lower conviction type cases because they
oh,
didn't,
like theft or something like that.
yeah, just kind of low stuff. So I thought that was an interesting part of
Yeah, because Barry and I
our
did notice
judicial.
there's a women's room. There's a men's room
Yes,
and a
we
women's room.
noticed that as well. And so Jamie goes, well, let me look that up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really thought it was important to view that whole jury prior to them going into the jury
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and having it being set in the very hot midst of summer,
Yeah.
humidity, horrible. They're all wearing suits.
I know.
And I also read that the director decided to have them rehearse in that closed space
Yep.
for several days
Yes.
and kept
Yes.
them confined
Right.
to get to know each other, to
Yeah.
feel like they could get each other's energy. They didn't say it that way.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, the director of this film had only, up to this point, Henry Fonda wanted him to be on it because he wanted it to feel like a TV type movie.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to be a big theatrical. He wanted it to
Right.
feel
To
close,
be intimate. He wanted it. Yeah,
intimate.
and Sidney Lumet is the director, and I think he had already directed lots of TV, so he
Oh
was
yeah, he
used
was
to that
using TV.
small
Right,
budget,
right.
small confined space. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
he does an amazing job in camera shots.
And the way he moves the
The
people
way he moves the
around.
people around in
Hmm.
just one room is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And the way
And
he
they're
has each one of them, like there's one character in particular who never sweats.
right.
And
Except for one when he
yes,
realizes,
but that's down the road, right? He
right.
finally something happens that he gets some little stressed.
Yeah.
He's calm, cool, and collected, and you notice it when you see the jury as well.
Yes.
Just sitting there, very straight.
Yes. And he's also he's a stockbroker, so he's analytical.
Yeah, very, very not a lot of expression.
Yeah. I
So
think he's
yeah, it's
juror number 4. He's played
four,
by E.G.
four.
Marshall.
Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing we need to mention. This amazing, well thought out cast
Mm-hmm.
of amazing, amazing actors. And there are some actors in there that aren't well known. They were
Right.
not famous.
Right.
However, what they bring to this film is it's monumental to me. I mean,
Yeah.
every one of them, what they have to offer, how they played each one of their roles, uh, it's timeless.
Yeah. Now there are two of the actors, the old man, Sweeney is his last name. I forgot what his first name is. And the guy that sits next to him, the immigrant guy, they were both in the TV version.
Yes, and they're theater actors,
Yeah,
most
but yeah, right. But those are the only two that were the same from the television show.
only two. Right. That's very good to point that out.
Yeah.
And so playing the same characters that they played in the TV.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think Henry Fonda he's a producer of the
Right.
movie, and this project was pretty important to him.
Oh yeah.
And to his dying day, it even says in the trivia that this, even though it didn't do a lot of financial, this was one of his most important movies.
Yeah.
One of the other ones being the crossbow incident, which I think
The Oxbow
Oxbow
incident.
incident is the Oxbow incident is a chilling film.
Yeah, we'll have to watch that sometime.
And I think we'll have to put this on our list.
Yeah.
However, so he was pretty disappointed that it didn't do well, but interested that it did well in Europe.
Eventually,
Yeah.
it did really well
Yeah.
in
In
the
his
United
lifetime, it
States.
became a cult classic. Yes.
Right. But yeah, it is so interesting that it was so popular. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't watched the special features.
Right. Right.
And
I,
also one more thing, when I watched this little segment on the special features with the lawyers, the whole thing about the second knife that he pulls out,
oh yes. Oh yes.
that would not he would have been kicked off if they had found out that he had done that.
They would have reported him.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah, because he should not have done that.
Yeah.
But
But I think the point of it is though, just like the judge, there's some lax things that lacks in, and maybe it was just the time and no one cared as much as they do now. I don't know.
right,
Because
right,
you kind of get the feeling that it is interesting when they bring them into the jury room, they lock the door.
right,
And one of the characters goes, oh, we're locking the door. And oh yeah, that's the rules.
yeah,
So they make that point, but it seems like it when they stay in their hotel rooms, it doesn't seem to be as a big deal, which
yeah.
I find. And
Well,
another
and
thing that lacks
oh,
is they're not supposed to have newspapers nowadays. And they've got newspapers on the table, current
right,
event newspapers on the table.
right, yeah, because E.G. Marshall's checking the stock things.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
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 Now
So yeah, to me, when people ask me, what are this movie is definitely on my list as a
mm-hmm,
film that is, I feel, timeless,
mm-hmm,
feel extremely profound,
mm-hmm,
and a lesson in acting.
yeah. Now, I'm going to go back to the knife issue
Oh, yes.
because you said something about they were kind of lackadaisical. And what's one of the things I thought was lackadaisical was the guy who said, I sold a knife like this and it's the only one I've ever seen. I bet you $2 that is not true, but he said it.
Right.
Who
Right.
knows why?
You are absolutely right.
So, I would immediately have questioned that
Yeah.
little bit of
Well,
testimony.
it's pointed out when they first start to deliberate, and Henry Fonda's character is the only one that votes not guilty to begin with.
Right,
And the thing that concerned him to begin with was the young man did not get a better lawyer.
right.
And he said the lawyer obviously did not care about what he was doing.
Or he was too inexperienced or something.
Either young and experienced, and he just didn't seem like he asked all the appropriate questions.
Right,
And so in this moment in the jury room, uh,
Hmm.
Henry Fonda is asking these questions.
Right. Yeah, he thinks they need, he says more than once, I don't know if he did it or not. I
Right.
might be
Right.
wrong, but we need to discuss this. We
Yeah,
need
we
to
need to
look at the
discuss all
evidence.
the layers of it because
Yeah,
they didn't get sought out in the courtroom.
right,
Everything was supposed to be taken at face value.
right,
They, and that's what gets pointed out meticulously as okay, well, how are we going to all convince him
right.
that we're right? That the
Exactly.
so they go around the table by each
Hmm.
juror number, and they point out this testimony said this and this, and then the next one, this testimony meant this to me. And
Right,
then you realize as they're all going meticulously through the testimonies that meant something to them, that they are going to, that's the setup for breaking each one of those testimonies down.
right. And that is interesting too, because Jack Klugman's character says, can you skip me?
Yeah,
I
he
don't want
says,
to.
I want to be skipped.
Yeah,
This is this is another lesson in acting is if you pay attention to him very carefully, you see how extremely uncomfortable he is
yeah,
without any words.
yeah.
He
But
almost
he,
does not want to be there.
when finally, when they actually get down to each little thing,
Yes.
he provides some really
Oh, amazing
important
information. And it
information
refers back
to the knife.
to the switchblade knife.
Right, the switchblade knife, right?
So yes, his
He's the only one who knows that
he seems
information.
like he's not going to be that important because he doesn't really want to talk, but he becomes extreme. And that's the thing that's so great about this movie is each character gets fair screen time,
Right.
which is very unusual
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're all together.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it yeah, it's just there's just words that I can't say sometimes because it it yeah, you're glued to the screen and it's the script is subtle, but then all of a sudden it's not subtle. It gets really punch you in the gut where you just like, okay, we went from, you know, over here to way over there really quickly.
Yeah.
And
And
and it
sometimes the way they talk to each other.
oh my gosh, there's so much you can tell it like Jack Warden's, he's just like, God, do we have to be here? And blah, 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 blah. We're just doing blah, 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 blah. I mean, he just so, and he sits in the, at the other end of the table and is just,
Right.
he's just like, come on, there's a game. I got a game to get to. And
Right.
he just really does not want to be there,
But
which is kind of interesting on how he was able to be chosen to
right.
free. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that seems very curious as well. And of course, we'll never know that. But how Henry Fonda starts to get everyone involved
Yes.
because of the question
So
that he
so they're going around the table and they stop at he's juror number 8, and as the juror number 1, who's the foreman,
yes,
says, okay, tell us. And he goes, well, I thought you were going to convince me, but then this is a scene we're going to see. He decides he's going to say why he voted
not guilty.
not guilty. And so we're going to see that scene, and it's right after they do
But
that. I think Lee J. Cobb is the one who gets kind of upset.
when he starts to say why he said no, yeah, no,
Yeah.
BJ Cobb, you can tell pretty much right away. He is so overtly agitated and angry.
Hmm.
Got the body language, the look on his face. The man is pissed off at
And
life.
he thinks everybody should vote guilty because he thinks he's guilty and they should just
Come
believe.
on, don't you
Right.
see it? Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. So it's right when when Henry Fonda says, starts to tell his story about what, or his reason for voting not guilty. And
Okay.
it's such a great scene, such a great
Well,
scene.
if you want me to tell you how I feel about it, it's all right with me.
Boy, I don't care what you do.
All right, I don't have anything brilliant. I only know as much as you do. According to testimony, the boy looks guilty. Maybe he is. I sat there in court for 6 days listening while the evidence built up. Everybody sounded so positive. You know, I began to get a peculiar feeling about this trial. I mean, nothing is that positive. There are a lot of questions I'd have liked to ask. I don't know, maybe they wouldn't have meant anything, but I began to get the feeling that the defense counsel wasn't conducting a thorough enough cross-examination. I mean, he let too many things go by, little things that...
What little things? Listen, when these fellows don't ask questions, it's because they know the answers already and they figure they'll be heard.
Maybe it's also possible for a lawyer to be just plain stupid, isn't it? I mean, it's possible.
You sound like you met my brother-in-law once.
I kept putting myself in the kid's place. I'd have asked for another lawyer, I think. I mean, if I was on trial for my life, I'd want my lawyer to tear the prosecution witnesses to shreds, or at least try to. Look, there was one alleged eyewitness to this killing. Someone else claims he heard the killing, saw the boy run out afterwards, and there was a lot of circumstantial evidence. But actually, those two witnesses were the entire case for the prosecution. Supposing they're wrong.
What do you mean, supposing they're wrong? What's the point of having witnesses at all?
Could they be wrong?
What are you trying to say? Those people sat on the stand under oath.
They're only people. People make mistakes. Could they be wrong?
Well, no, I don't think so.
You know so.
Oh, come on, nobody can know a thing like that. This isn't an exact science.
That's right, it isn't.
Yeah, so there are lots of little things that happen right before we get to hear Henry Fonda's character's reason for voting not guilty that are so telling that you and I were talking about while we were watching that scene. And each character kind of says their own thing that turns on them later in the movie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, all the reasons that they give why they think this young man is guilty.
mhm,
It does, like I said, it sets it up for them to meticulously go over each one of their reasons and break it down.
Right.
Which is, you would hope jurors do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Let's go over this testimony and let's go over this testimony. And when they are giving their answers, it's either, well, I don't know, I just think he's guilty. It just seemed obvious from the very beginning to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kids these days,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care about you and they don't care about the parents, so to speak, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you can tell that it's very much a bias of father-son relationship.
Right.
Like he thinks this kid is guilty.
Right.
And then it's, you know, those kind of people.
Right.
Well, it's those kind of people. You know, they always got something going on.
Right.
You know, and they just always got something that's not right. And, you know, they live in the slums and, you know, they smell like trash and that just breeds crime, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, there are a couple of people who have sort of rational arguments. The stockbroker, he's E.G. Marshall is the guy who plays juror number 3, and he does say, well, the thing that convinced me was he said he went to the movies, but he couldn't remember what he saw.
Yeah. And he goes, I mean, why couldn't you remember? It's only been a few hours.
Right. Yeah.
Although I really love Henry Fonda's response. I think it is a little bit later. He says, his father, he comes home and his father's dead in the other room on the floor.
Right.
That's trauma. It's a traumatic situation.
Right.
Why would he be expected to remember that?
Right. Yeah.
His situation and what movies he went and saw. They don't say the word shock, but the kid's, you know, scared out of his mind.
Yeah. Because he knows he's implicated right off the bat.
Of course, right. He knows exactly. And of course, one of the things that Henry Fonda is pointing out is, how do we know they're telling the truth?
Right. The witnesses.
The witnesses. How do we know they're telling the truth? don't you want to question what they say is 100% sure?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And later he says when because they examined the testimony of the old man who supposedly heard the body fall and heard the person running, and
Right.
he says he got from his bedroom to the front door in 15 seconds, and they find
Right.
out no, it wasn't 15
Well,
seconds.
it
It was
couldn't be because he had a bum leg.
right because he'd had a stroke.
Yeah.
But that they examine that testimony, and they examine the testimony of the woman who's seeing the murder through the L
Through the L
windows,
train. Yep.
and also there
From
they
how many
talk
feet?
about how
From like several feet. It's like
yeah,
45 feet or more, you know?
yeah. But then also they also examine how loud the L is, so you wouldn't be able to hear voices that they
And how
claim
many
they heard.
seconds it takes to get across.
Hmm.
They really
But
start breaking it down.
they do. But one thing that I like is that, Henry Fonda keeps saying they didn't intentionally lie.
No, no, he does say that. They think they're telling the truth.
That's right.
Right. And it does become a study of each one of these jurors on possibly why they would give the testimony in the way that they did.
Yeah. You mean the
I mean, the witnesses.
the
Yeah,
witnesses,
I
right?
think that's really important to break that down like they did because, you know, the constant thing that keeps being said by all the jurors, especially two or three of them, is, but we really don't know if he's innocent or guilty. And
Right.
aren't we supposed to question it?
Right.
Aren't we supposed to be more sure than we are right now?
Exactly.
That's what we're here for, is to
Right.
question it, to
Right.
question the testimony, to question the validity.
Right.
They're 100% sure.
Right. And it's interesting how, as they examine the each little piece of testimony, it's interesting how one person is convinced, oh my gosh, maybe he's not guilty
Right.
by just one little thing,
Like one little question that turns out to not be
exact.
100%.
Right.
Well, and then one guy says, because Henry Fonda's saying, how can we know this? And how can we? And the guy goes, well, it's not an exact science. And he goes, exactly. It's not.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
guy's kind of, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, one of the first things that happens is when Henry Fonda comes up with the second knife that looks exactly like the knife that's in evidence, the
Yeah,
murder
because they
weapon.
decide to break it down. Okay, well, let's go with the first thing is how the father and the angle of the knife that entered his
Mhm.
body.
Right.
Well, so when they start doing that, Henry Fonda goes, how could it have gone in like this from up above when the kid is almost a foot shorter
Right.
than the man who was killed?
Right.
And so they're like, okay, well, let's demonstrate. And so Lee J. Cobb's character was like, well, I'm going to show you exactly how it happened. Yeah, he's going to demonstrate. And so he scrouches down to what they think the height of the kid is. And Henry Fonda is being the dad, and Lee J. Cobb is the kid. And he's got that knife, which is, let's remember again, it's a switchblade. You got to push a button for it to open.
Right.
And he gets down there and he reaches up and over to reach where the angle they say the stabbing happened. And you can see the jurors sitting there going, well, that just seems odd. He's like, that's
Well,
exactly how I would do it.
well, and also they've already had come to conflict, Lee Jacob and Henry Fonda's character.
Oh,
So
yes.
everybody,
That's
so
what
when
I
he
like.
goes like this, everybody goes,
Oh, yeah. And he's like, I got it under control. I know
yeah.
what I'm doing. Although Henry Fonda's not frightened, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
So then the conversation continues to be where Jack Klugman's character,
Right.
who was raised, he says, listen, let me tell you, I was raised where all these knife street fights would happen.
Yeah.
And he goes, a knife like this, that's not how you stab. He goes, you got to push this button, the blade comes out, and you go like this.
You do underhand,
But
right?
you got to go under because it's quicker and more efficient. And
Because you
everyone's like,
can't, you don't want to
yeah, you
change.
don't want to switch it to where
Right.
it's like this. You want to have it in your hand just exactly how it is
Right.
as you push the button. And then that causes the question of, well, then why would it be stabbed like that with a short kid?
Right.
So then okay, then some jurors start to go, oh, yeah, that's not right. He was way too short for that, and it wouldn't be up here.
Right.
So
And it wouldn't be a downward angle.
no downward angle, right? So then, of course, they revote, and one or two decide not guilty. And then, of course, everyone's irritated because they just want to leave, and
Right.
and I love how just because Henry Fonda is so, his character is just so questioning,
Calm.
calm, and never gets flustered.
Right.
Never.
Right.
But the tension
Oh,
with some of these other jurors is so important because you see
yeah.
that even amongst some of them, there is a prejudice.
Yeah. But I just thought
Jack
of
Morton's
something.
character is he doesn't like immigrants. He makes that very clear because
Right.
the watchmaker gentleman, and he goes, "Oh, all of you that come here and telling us how things should be done."
Right.
And then so there's more than one juror that has a certain kind of prejudice.
Right.
Go ahead, what were you
Now
gonna
I just thought of something. Before the knife incident, Henry Fonda makes a decision and he's hoping somebody is going to back him up that if they have another vote and everybody votes that he's
Oh yeah.
guilty, then he'll vote guilty.
Oh yes. If
But
everyone
of
he goes,
course,
the
the old
that's a
man,
really important point.
yeah,
Yes.
old
Let's
man
revote.
backs him up.
If you all think he's guilty,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say okay, and then we'll be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And then I think it's the old man first.
Yeah. It
He
is.
says, "Well, I like how he's questioning this.
Yeah.
I too now have more questions.
Right.
Do you think that there are more things we should be going over more meticulously?"
Right. Yeah. And then it's after that sometime that the knife thing happens when Henry Fonda brings out the second knife, and
Yeah,
then they talk
no
about how
other knife, no other knife. And a part of the whole thing that somebody questions the young kid is he had the knife, but he had a hole in his pocket.
right.
So, and
He
oh,
lost it.
that's so ridiculous. He didn't have a hole in his pocket. There's no way it got lost when he was walking to the movies.
Right.
And once again, how do you know he didn't have a hole in his pocket?
Right. He
Did they
doesn't have a mom to
He
mend
doesn't
his
have a mom to
clothes.
fix his clothes.
Right.
And did they look at his pants?
I know. Or
That never
jacket.
got brought up. They didn't look at his jacket or his pants or anything.
Right.
So here we are again questioning the 100% validity of,
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I think is important too is it gets brought up that the police officers roughed this kid up enough where they shoved him down a half a flight of stairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Assuming
Assuming
he was the murderer.
Well, even if he was guilty, that's police brutality.
I know.
There's a bias because probably the community that it took place in.
Right. Exactly.
So anyway, so yes, the older man says not guilty. So then they go meticulously through. Okay, so let's bring up the next topic. What about this? And it's the old man's testimony who says he got from his room to the front of the door in 15 seconds.
Right.
And so they ask for a blueprint of the apartment so they can see how many feet it is from his room to the front door. And if he could do it in 15 seconds, Henry Fonda's character maps it out around the room.
Mm-hmm.
And he pretends he has the bum leg that is basically dragging behind him. And they time it out and they're like, oh, he could go faster than that. And he goes, okay, I'll go a little faster. And by the time he does click, opens the door, okay, the door's open. 45 seconds.
Right.
And that causes even more people to go, well, why did
Okay.
it only took him 15 seconds?
Right.
So they speculate on his personality. He's an older gentleman. The old man is perfect to have him speculate this. That maybe he's lonely and just needs some attention.
Exactly.
Not doing it purposely, but it's important for him to be a witness
Right.
because they came to him and asked him. And so he's a witness and he is going and could possibly, they don't say this, have a bias himself.
Mm-hmm.
This young man being of certain, descent.
Right.
And of course, they also bring up a few other charges the young man had been brought up on
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, in his juvenile.
in his juvenile years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so, that I think makes the juror members feel biased because, well, he's a crook already.
Right.
Why would he do
Exactly.
this? This is just his lot in life,
Yes.
So when they go through that whole thing, they break it down. Why would he say this? Why would he say this? Okay, well, it obviously couldn't take him 15 seconds, no matter who tried to do it, unless you were running high speed, because that's a huge discrepancy. 15
Yeah.
seconds, 45 seconds.
Yeah, that is.
So,
But we don't really, in our minds, we don't really know how long things take.
that's kind of one of the things that gets brought up. Did he have a watch on him to look at it? Did he wake up and go, oh,
Right. Exactly.
of course those things aren't happening.
Right.
It's in the wee hours of sleeping.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
that takes
He was
place.
awakened in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Right. He heard the body drop. So he ran to his door. And of course, the next question is, well, how could he hear the body drop? The L train's going by.
Mm-hmm.
That's loud. And they all agree how loud an L train is. You can't even think straight.
Well, and I think Henry Fonda says you could practically touch it if you put your hand out the window.
Right.
That's
how close it was to these
yeah.
apartments.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it shakes things up and blah, 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 and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that causes them to question that. How could he hear that? How could he
Right.
hear that?
Yeah.
And how could he hear, I'm going to kill you?
Exactly. How could he hear that shouted? Well, he shouted it. Well, yeah, but I don't know. I think that the train would have drowned it out.
Yeah.
Although he's probably heard the kids say that or the father say that more than once.
Oh,
and so he just assumed.
He just says, okay, well, because that was their probably regular conversation they always had.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
So that the thing that's hard to talk about in this movie and in the scenes that we're showing and we're talking about is the build up and the demonstration that they show of each one of these jury members.
Yeah. And how one thing leads
all the relationships.
Yeah.
The weaving in of how they talk to each other, how they demonstrate, just little things that are subtle but very profound on you get a really good idea of how each one of these people probably live their lives.
Yeah. And think.
Some don't want to.
Right.
They just muddle through life and do their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, exactly.
It's almost like, some of them are bored themselves.
They're not critical thinkers. Jack Gordon's character's not a critical thinker.
No. He just he sells preserved marmalade or something. Yeah. And right, and it's interesting because they have scenes where each one of them a few of them each time will go into the men's restroom and clean
have
up
little conversations.
Because it's so hot, they're splashing and they're having little conversations, and in between certain, Henry Fonda goes in when Jack Warden's in there, and a few of them here and there are trying to convince him to can we just get it over with?
Yeah. Right.
On.
Right.
What are you doing? you know, but of course none of it works
Right. Well,
because
yeah, it doesn't work because he's not convinced.
well, and you know why it doesn't work too, and this is a really important part to it, I think, is he is absolutely assured of himself.
Yes. And I think he has empathy for the kid.
Complete. And really, you start to find out that more of them have it more than they thought they would.
Yes.
You know, it
Yes.
starts to really come out, and Jack Klugman's character really starts to show that.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that a community like that is a mix of all sorts of people. He himself says, I came from that.
Yes.
You know, do you smell it on me? Do you see me? I'm not a crook.
Right.
It's not
And
my way of life.
and it's interesting what you said while we had it paused and we were watching the scene. That the guy that's sitting next to him, the guy that like he does construction work and painting and stuff like that, how he defends other people
Right,
on the jury from the ones who are more aggressive.
right.
Like he defends the old man
Yeah.
and
You know, there are
tells.
people, but some of them kind of get at each other a little.
Oh yeah, Lee J. Cobb is quite. It's so interesting. He says, I used to have to call my father sir, and kids don't do that anymore. But then he attacks the old man. He's so disrespectful.
He totally attacks him,
And
and
that kid
the
and
other
that
thing that
guy says, "I'm gonna punch you out if
goes,
you
you
don't."
talk to him like that again,
Right.
I'm gonna punch you out. I'm gonna
Yeah.
take you out.
Yeah.
And of course he's just like, and then there's another scene where um the guy with the cold, his Ed Begley gets
Yes.
really disrespectful too, and he goes, just basically tells him to shut up and sit down and stop talking.
Right.
You don't have anything positive or good to contribute.
Right.
And he kind of is like, oh, like,
Yeah.
okay. Which both times the bullies are the cowards.
Right. Exactly. So we're going to see that right after the where they demonstrate the old man walking down to the
Oh, okay.
door, and we're going to watch that scene.
Stop.
Right.
What's the time?
Exactly 41 seconds.
Here's what I think happened. The old man heard the fight between the boy and his father a few hours earlier. Then when he's lying in his bed, he heard a body hit the floor in the boy's apartment, heard the woman scream from across the street, got to his front door as fast as he could, heard somebody racing down the stairs, and assumed it was the boy.
I think that's possible.
Assume? Brother, I've seen all kinds of dishonesty in my day, but this little display takes the cake. You all come in here with your hearts bleeding all over the floor about slum kids and injustice. You listen to some fairy tales. Suddenly you start getting through to some of these old ladies. Well, you're not getting through to me. I've had enough. What's the matter with you guys? You all know he's guilty. He's got to burn. You're letting him slip through our fingers.
Slip through our fingers? Are you his executioner?
I'm one of them.
Perhaps you'd like to pull the switch.
For this kid, you bet I would.
I feel sorry for you. What it must feel like to want to pull the switch. Ever since you walked into this room, you've been acting like a self-appointed public avenger. You want to see this boy die because you personally want it, not because of the facts. You're a sadist.
Kill him, I'll kill him!
You don't really mean you'll kill me, do you?
Is there anything wrong, gentlemen? I heard some noise.
Oh, no, everything's all right. We're just, friendly little argument. That's, listen, we're through with that diagram. You can take it if you want. Yeah. Thank you.
What are you looking at?
One of the things I love about that little exchange is that he is showing what he talked about before, about the thing between he and his son.
Yeah.
That's why he wants to convict this kid.
Yeah.
And when Henry Fonda says, this is what I think happened, and he's talking about the guy did get to the door as soon as he could, and he heard somebody running down the stairs,
Right.
and he assumed that it was the kid.
Right.
Yeah, oh man.
Lee J. Cobb is so pissed. Assumed.
Yeah, and he's just like, I don't understand why you guys, because he's obviously guilty and all this stuff. Well, there's this beautiful thing, a stage picture, I call it, where a lot of the men are standing over by the
Yes.
restroom doors, and Lee J. Cobb is by himself over by the window.
Right.
It's such a beautiful.
Well, the entire time. As soon as they say 41 seconds, which I said 45, but it's 41.
Yeah.
They all gather around like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And he stays by the window.
Right.
He just has no interest in it. He thinks the demonstration's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
The kid is so obviously guilty. And then he's, assume. And he's pointing at and screaming right at Henry Fonda's character. Like, you don't understand these bleeding hearts, all your bleeding hearts for these slum kids. He's just so angry.
Yeah, and I love that he's the one who says, "I'll kill you."
Yeah, well,
Because-
he goes after.
Right.
Because he's so angry. And Henry Fonda said something, and he's like, and the men are holding him back. And the look of anger, despair, and shame all at once that Lee J. Cobb has is an acting. It's master acting.
It is.
It makes me cry.
Yeah.
His pain.
And we see that pain again at the end when he rips up the picture of he and his son.
Yeah. It's and really, quite frankly, the response of all the jurors when he screams that, and then they're holding him back, and he says, "You don't really mean you're going to kill me, right?" Everybody's like, "Oh, it was a lesson for them." They heard it. It was a big, huge comprehension moment for them. And it kind of, really, I think for me, as I sobbing watching that whole scene, is how I get the impression that this is a time period where a lot of people really seriously, it was seriously class. Yes. Everybody lived in their own class.
Right.
And didn't really socialize outside of that. It wasn't community building at all, especially in 1957.
Yes.
And each one of these men show different layers of class.
Right. Exactly. You're right. Exactly. Yeah. And maybe it's still like that to a certain extent. I think maybe it's breaking down a little bit, but I think we still tend to kind of cling to the people that we feel the most comfortable with.
It's, living here in Washington State in the Kent area of, we're mere 15 minutes from Seattle and the airport. It's like that here. We have a street that is pretty much designated. You can tell all the people are from India, all the restaurants, all their clothing stores, all their beauty salons. It's all right there in this several blocks. And then you can go to another little part and you can see in the Renton area, you go to Rainier Beach, and it's kind of like the African area of what is it? The Ethiopian restaurants. And a lot of that stuff is there. And then you get to certain areas and it's the Mexican restaurants and the Mexican. So it's still happening.
Right.
And what I mean
Except,
by that is I mean, I think it doesn't seem intentional to us,
Mhm.
but I've heard Pete Buttigieg when he talks, and it's called redlining.
Mhm.
And he explained how they do that and
Mhm.
how long they've been doing that since the Civil War.
Mhm.
Redlining's been going on, and it's the gerrymandering that are a part of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
It's making sure that certain areas of real estate is certain prices.
Yes. Well,
Uh,
and we also talked about a previous movie with the uh restricted, it was anti-Maine, the restricted
oh, the
communities.
restricted communities, right. Now,
It's not it's not
it doesn't
technically called that now.
technically obvious, right, right. Um, I think it's gotten a lot better,
Mhm.
but we talk about it a lot based off of certain school districts too.
Mhm.
Like when we first moved into our house, the high school that would have been available for Shane, he's like, I have my um middle school teacher who used to teach there, and she's like, you don't want to go to that school. That's the school, that's the rough school.
Mhm.
And she says it is very, yes, several cultures. She didn't use the word redlining, but when I used it to Shane, Shane goes, oh yeah,
Mhm.
it is probably that.
Mhm.
And so he didn't go there for his first year of high school. And even the high school that I had to drive him quite a bit of ways to, we discovered was kind of still like that.
Mhm.
He didn't know about it. We were told, hey, if you want to go to an alternatives kind of school, try this. Well, it turned out to not be really great. And um, then they changed the borders of the schools that summer or at the end of that school year. And now he goes to this school. We're considered kind of more in the Covington area. And a lot of rich kids go to that school.
Mhm.
And as far as I'm concerned, they're like, oh, it's just controlling numbers. But is it? I
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though we go to these restaurants or maybe even shop at some of the stores in these neighborhoods, we don't live in those neighborhoods.
No, we don't. And like I was telling somebody the other day, one of our favorite breakfast places to go, and they're like, oh, is that an okay part of town? I'm like, she's one of the top rated breakfast restaurants in the community.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, really? I'm like, oh yeah, she's fantastic. It's
Mhm.
amazing food.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I guess, this in 1957, it was probably a lot more obvious.
Mhm.
And they make that the point that it's very obvious.
Mhm.
Um,
So it's more
you get a concept of what each one of these men do for a living.
mhm.
And, you kind of get the impression that Lee J. Cobb is probably making some really good money.
He's making
And
good money because he has a delivery service. We
he has a
find out
delivery
that he
service. It's like
mhm.
it was like what Jamie was equating to our Uber
Right. And he
deliveries.
has like he says how many employees he has. It's like 30
Oh
employees or
yeah,
something.
he's got quite a business. And he's
Mhm.
angry because he and his son don't get along anymore and they had a big fight and he hasn't seen him in years and he was supposed to be a part of the business and he
Mhm.
wants nothing to do with me because, what did I do to him?
Right.
I was trying to teach him to be a man.
Mhm.
When he tells that whole thing of he got in a
Mhm.
fight when he was 9 years old
Mhm.
and he didn't know how to defend himself. And I was so upset, it made me sick to my stomach. I was so ashamed.
Mhm.
I mean, that as they call it now, that toxic masculinity.
Mhm.
And each one of these you see there's some of that in that each one
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
characters where
Yeah.
there's the man that stands up for the other two gentlemen, the immigrant and the old man,
Yeah.
stands up for them. He's masculine, but he's not toxic.
Right. he is just, yeah, it's like he has empathy. Jack
Good.
Klugman,
Yeah.
uh, juror number 2, the little guy with the
I even think
glasses.
juror number 1, the foreman, there's
Mhm.
a moment where he and Henry Fonda are talking, and he's a football coach.
Mhm.
And he talks about, we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for all these kids coming in.
Mhm. Mhm.
He's totally open to the immigration thing,
Right.
without
Exactly.
saying those words.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So it's interesting we get to see the different personalities and the
Yes,
different
yes.
where they're coming from. The one that is kind of enigmatic is juror number 3, no, 4, I think. Uh E.G. Marshall's character, the stockbroker guy, who is so analytical,
Yeah.
so cool,
He always
calm, and
sits straight,
collected.
doesn't have any expression on his face. He's
Right.
got glasses, and he just sits and he plays with a pencil or a pen the entire time. Like
Mhm.
that's calming to him, or some sort of
Mhm.
little thing. And he's got the newspaper sitting in front of him, and after this, you don't really mean you want to kill me. They all have to calm down a little bit and regroup. And I think, you know, let's see, how far are we into the movie? We're like
Well,
near the end.
we're getting close to the
Yeah.
end because,
This is
yeah,
the parts that's coming up is what I think is really they s- they go to EJ Cobb's character, and he says, "Well, why do you think he's guilty?"
right. I
And
want to
Henry
do
Fonda
the
says,
Ed
"Why do you?"
Begley. Yeah, I want to do when they get to the vote, they vote again, and it's
Oh, yes.
9-3.
This
This
is a really profound.
Ed Begley's tirade about his racial tirade about these people and blah 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 blah, and and how this is another staging thing.
Very
Slowly,
good.
one by one, people get up and they turn their back on him.
Well, and it's important to note that it comes soon after Lee J. Cobb's kind of outraged thing too. He's
Mm-hmm.
outraged, and he's
Mm-hmm.
already got his back to the jury, to the table. He's looking
Mm-hmm.
out the window
Mm-hmm.
because he can't look at anybody anymore.
Right.
You can
Exactly.
see that that's exactly what's going on with him. He just can't look at anybody. So he's
Mm-mm.
already looking outside. And then
Ed Begley goes
Ed
on his.
Begley's character just has this rage, but like, what the heck is wrong with all of you? Why can't you see that these people are blah, blah, blah?
Right.
We will go to this because that is in a very, very, very important part of this as well.
Oh, it
Because
is.
what he doesn't see is how he's insulting some of the people that are in the room with him,
Yes.
you know?
Well, and also what he doesn't see is his own prejudice. He doesn't see his
Well,
own prejudice.
he's not self-examining.
No, no,
Kelly's
no, no.
not that kind of man.
Mm-mm.
He just trudges through life and, rah, rah, yeah, he's just
Yeah.
angry. And, but
Mm-hmm.
but miserable angry, not rage angry.
Mm-hmm.
He just thinks everything kind of is lousy. And
Yeah.
it's just the way it is.
Right.
He's just really got this
Mm-hmm.
unhappiness muck going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when this comes up, it's just
It's devastating to him.
beautiful scene. Another,
Yeah.
there's scene after scene. And you cannot get away with this movie without continually saying masterclass in script writing and in acting and
Yes.
staging. Staging
Yes. And
and the way
and
the
it's
camera angles change.
right. And in this case, it's finally when almost everybody turns their back on him that he gets it. He
Well, and it's
finally,
interesting because the stockbroker is the one that's like, you just need to sit down and
yeah.
be
Stockbroker's the only one who doesn't turn his back on him,
no, but he
but
stares him down somewhat. He looks at him like, and he's calm,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
doing, yes, we get your point. It's time for you to be quiet now.
mm-hmm, yeah.
And he doesn't sit back down in his spot interesting that you don't see it until there's a separate table with a single chair that's facing like the wall.
Mm-hmm.
The chair is facing the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he goes to sit as they've all had their backs turned to him.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the ones that you would think would not turn their back on him,
Mm-hmm.
they do.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll
So
watch.
I'm going to pause it and let's go watch it.
Well, the vote's 9-3 in favor of acquittal.
I don't understand you people. I mean, all these picky little points you keep bringing up, they don't mean nothing. You saw this kid just like I did. You're not going to tell me you believe that phony story about losing the knife and that business about being at the movies? Look, you know how these people lie? It's born in them. I mean, what the heck? I don't have to tell you. They don't know what the truth is. And let me tell you, they don't need any real big reason to kill someone either. No, sir. They get drunk. Oh, they're real big drinkers, all of them. You know that. And bang, someone's lying in the gutter. Well, nobody's blaming them for it. That's the way they are, by nature. You know what I mean? Violent. Where are you going? Human life don't mean as much to them as it does to us. Look, they're lushing it up and fighting all the time. And if somebody gets killed, so somebody gets killed. They don't care. Oh, sure, there's some good things about them, too. Look, I'm the first one to say that. I've known a couple who were okay, but that's the exception, you know what I mean? Most of them, it's like they have no feelings. They can do anything. What's going on here? Well, I'm trying to tell you. You're making a big mistake, you people. This kid is a liar. I know it. I know all about them. Listen to me. They're no good. There's not a one of them who's any good. I mean, what's happening in here? I'm speaking my piece, and you... Listen to me. We're this kid on trial here. His type. Well, don't you know about them? There's a danger here. These people are dangerous. They're wild. Listen to me. Listen.
I have. Now sit down and don't open your mouth again.
So I'm trying to tell you.
Well, I just love that moment. You and I both agree. When he has this outrage about these people don't care about life and, don't you see who they are? I mean, it's just this rambling of, a word vomit of I'm a racist.
And they aren't human.
They're not human. Don't you realize they're not even human? Don't you see? Don't you see? Can't you hear me? And they all slowly get up, or as some do, like one guy at the end of the table, he just turns around like, I'm not even going to look at you. And they all turn their back or their heads, won't even look at him, because no one wants to sit at the table with him.
Right. Exactly.
Except for E.G. Marshall, the stockbroker. And he just sits there and he's just watching him. He's watching the whole thing play out. And he looks right. He goes, okay, so he's the only one that's still sitting here. Don't you hear me? Don't you hear everything I'm saying? He goes, and I love how calmly he goes, yes. And you need to sit down and stop talking. And he's like, oh. And he goes over to the table that we never see.
Yeah.
And then they all slowly start to come back to the table.
And I like what you said, that he is making them all look at themselves.
Oh, they all have to look at themselves. You can see it. This is another one of those masterclass in acting.
Right.
They're all just like, oh. And there are some that don't feel that way.
Right.
There's probably about 3 or 4. Old man, Henry Fonda, the football coach, that really
Jack
don't
Klugman.
Jack Klugman. They don't feel
Maybe
this.
the guy that's the
The
painter
maintenance
that,
guy, the
yeah,
painter, he doesn't feel that way. You can tell he's a very
the
these people.
watchmaker.
Yeah. Oh, the immigrant, right? Absolutely. Why these other men, I think, start to change their minds because when this rage happens, they realize as jurors and as human beings, they were judging him based off of those very things.
Exactly.
And they
And
didn't.
so that's right. And so E.G. Marshall, I think, would have changed his mind, except for the whole woman seeing the murder through the
Yeah,
L.
she saw it through the L. She saw it. She saw it, which of course is the very final discussion.
Exactly. With and I love that Henry Fonda makes them. How long would it take for the L to go through? And then the old man remembers that because E.G.
Because
Marshall's
Lee
going
J.
like this.
Cobb, he takes his glasses off as he's explaining
E.G.
something.
Marshall, yeah,
E.G. Marshall, yeah, sorry. He takes his glasses off. He's the stockbroker and he's cleaning them.
right.
And all of a sudden, the old man goes, "Do you always wear your glasses? And do you wear your glasses to bed?"
Well, I think it's Henry Fonda that asks him about wearing
And
them
so
to
they're
bed.
asking all these questions, and
But
he's
the
like,
old man is talking about the woman
yeah,
who
and then he
has
goes, "Wait a minute.
right.
I think she must wear glasses." He goes, "Do those always leave an imprint on the side of your nose
Mm-hmm.
like that?"
Mm-hmm.
And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, Yes." He says, "I noticed she had those. She had those, but she wasn't wearing her glasses when she was on the stand."
And then other people go, "Oh, I noticed that too."
And I did. She did have that. I can't believe I didn't think of it. Of course she had that. So then, of course, the speed of the Eve, the whole thing, and they're like, how far away she was. And if you don't wear your glasses to bed and you jump up to see because you heard a noise, would you be able to see? We don't know. Yes, we don't know if she was nearsighted or farsighted. We get that. But as fast as that train is going, how would she be able to see anything without
And
glasses?
and since we don't know if she was
Right.
farsighted or nearsighted, that calls into question her testimony.
Her testimony being valid.
Right.
And of course, the stockbroker is like, that's when because he's not sweating the entire time until then. And,
Right.
he's sweating more because when they question him about the movies, well, do you remember what movie you saw the other night?
Mm-hmm.
Monday, yes, blah, blah, blah. Because, Henry Fonda's taking him through each day of the week backwards.
Right.
And then here, he's like, oh, she doesn't have her glasses on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wear your glasses to bed. All of this logic comes to all at once to him, and you can see him change his mind.
Yeah.
And the other ones too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then Lee J. Cobb's the only one
The
left.
holdout. Yep, he's the holdout because he's still he stands at that window for the rest of this time until his rage because it's 11-1.
And they want
Okay?
him to
You
explain.
tell us
Right.
why we should all agree with you.
Yeah.
Is that another scene we're going to watch?
No, unfortunately, I only try to keep it to 3 because I
Okay.
want it to get through the
Well,
copyright.
I kind of wanted to watch that scene. I think it's an important one because his emotions, and we'll just talk about it
Yeah.
because he's in rage is personal.
Yes.
He
And
thinks
and you can tell because he rips he
oh yeah, he
he's
takes
getting
out his picture. He's like, these kids, these damn kids,
and he
then
rips up the
he
picture.
rips up the picture of he and his son. That's a joyous picture.
It is.
And and then of course, as he is tearing up the picture, they're all seeing his pain. And he sits down and just he cries.
Yeah.
He sees all of it in that
Mhm.
moment of what he's done. And not only how he was judging this young man, but why he doesn't have a relationship with his son.
I know. Yeah. That is so sad.
And he's shaking and he just puts his face down and it's just whoa. It's just so and the way they just you know what's so great about this movie that we need to mention? The only music is at the beginning and the
And
end.
at the end.
There's no soundtrack.
Right.
It is all just them
Right.
in the jury room having this discussion.
Right.
That's profound.
Yeah.
They don't
it
need to have to tell you how to feel.
Right. Exactly.
It's just so amazing.
Yeah, and the two men who
And
have their outbursts finally say, "Oh, not guilty." They realize. They
yeah,
realize.
because he says as he's sobbing, not guilty, not
Mhm.
guilty.
Mhm.
And they're like, because just before then, they were like, okay, let's set another timeline because, you know, we're kind of getting irritated here. And they beat that timeline because of the way they're able to all realize from the two, especially the two men's outburst.
Mhm.
And how they just start to slowly play the music and they're leaving the jury room to go give their verdict. And then at the end, as they're leaving the courthouse, they're all going their separate ways. And the old man walks up to Henry Fonda and he introduces himself. And then, you know, what do you do for a living? Henry Fonda. I'm an architect. You
Mhm.
know, so you get the impression, isn't it interesting? The man that probably in that room that makes the most money is the man that has the critical thinking and non-judgment
Mhm.
of race.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that is so important.
Yeah. Well, the stockbroker might make a good amount of money too, but
Oh, of course. Yes. Of course.
he's not an emotional.
No,
He
no, he's very
he's
analytical, like you
analytical.
said.
Yeah.
Right.
But the other thing that Barry noticed when we were watching this is as you see them all going down the steps, Barry said, I never noticed it before, but Lee J. Cobb is
Oh,
the
I noticed it too.
last one
He's the last one. He does
to
not have, he's just still
yes.
walking so slow. Everyone's kind of fast down the stairs except for him.
Mhm.
I noticed it last night too. I went, oh my God, look at him. I said, I've seen this movie a million times.
Never noticed it
I
before.
never noticed his slow descent down the stairs and how sad he's remorseful.
Mhm.
It's not even sadness. He's just full of grieving and remorse.
Mhm.
He's so grieving.
Yeah, and I always wonder this kind of thing after I
Me
finish a
too. I
story.
wonder.
Will he go and try to make amends with his
Right.
son?
Yeah. And I also wonder too, you know, how if any of them live in areas where they have seen each other before and didn't know, and if they saw each other again, they'd go, oh, hi,
Yeah, right.
you
Yeah.
know, oh, hi, there
Yeah.
you are, you know, because in that short amount of time, they got to know each other
Mhm.
and it's like a bonding time.
Yeah.
So I think when you see by the end of this movie, you understand why in so many courses they need to use this
Yes.
in the whole conflict resolution.
Yes.
You know how a jury should be deliberating.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, there's a reason why they have these lawyers analyzing. It's just so. And I can't. We're gonna say this in every film that we watch and that we recommend. We cannot recommend this enough. And every movie that we talk about, this one including almost most of all, you will never get tired of watching it.
Oh no.
There are so many little intricate things.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
like we just said, I've watched this a million times. I never noticed Lee J. Cobb walking down those steps.
Being
Never
the
noticed
last one. Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
last one because he's just in so much despair,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
and how they don't stop acting outside the courtroom.
Right. Really.
It's
Yeah.
still important.
Yeah.
Still
It is.
matters, you know, and to me, this movie is life. And that's why we love what we love because it's life.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's lessons. Oh my gosh. You and I will never read or love a film that doesn't have something to teach you.
Oh yeah, if like Barry and I watched a movie the other night, and we really love Joan Cusack and John Cusack, and it was called War Inc. It was like the worst movie.
Oh no,
But,
I don't like that movie. I was
and
really surprised they did it. I was like, why did they make that movie?
I know.
But I also think you always have good points about editing.
Mm.
If you don't do, and I think it was supposed to make a certain point, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't make the point that I think they wanted to have it to make.
Maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
because the actors don't have control
No,
over the editing. Yeah.
but there are, oh, yeah, I just, we've got some, look, we're going to be doing this for many, many years, Lucinda.
Oh yeah, and
Because
I'm
it's just
up for doing it
so,
every other week because there's so many movies.
yeah, and I want to share our link with some more people because, um, I think oh, you gotta share with me movies. You always give me the best movies to watch. And this is her way of getting my list of films to watch.
Yes, right.
Because uh the one thing we absolutely could add to our list are even comedies have something to teach you.
Oh, definitely. Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking after we get through with these sort of politically
Right.
relevant ones.
Current, relevant still.
Yes, which the next one is too,
Oh
Inherit the
yes.
Wind.
Oh yes.
I was thinking that we should do some comedies and maybe
Yeah.
some musicals and that kind
Yeah,
of thing. Just
I
something.
think some of that would be really good. There are you know, I know some people, oh, old movies, aren't they kind of boring?
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, no.
yeah, I mean, you're not watching the old movies I watch.
Really?
And I think even there's some sci-fi ones that are like the one I think is The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes. Yes. So you're right. So next time we're watching Inherit the Wind and with Spencer Tracy and Frederick March, and even in the Hollywood um what do you call it?
Land.
Landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, people would just come to watch them
They
act.
wanted to see the masters at work
Yes.
because I don't say it enough. Everyone knows Spencer Tracy is my go-to
Oh yeah.
acting masterclass.
Yes.
Both these men, Frederick March,
They're both so
he
good.
has a group of films. His filmography is profound.
Mhm. Yeah.
And he
Spencer
is
Tracy's too.
oh yeah, both of them. They're just
Yeah. And Gene Kelly has a serious role in this.
not singing and dancing, and
Mm-mm.
he holds up. He
Mm-hmm.
matches these two.
Mm-hmm. He does.
And as Ariel would say, continues to be beautiful.
Yes. Exactly. Okay.
I mean, but I love that they chose him to be in this film to play the role that he plays.
Me too.
So yes, Inherit the Wind.
Go watch the movie.
Go watch what we just told you to watch. Go watch Inherit the Wind, and
Yes.
we'll see you in a few weeks.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.